All in Sports Network. We love sports.
The Kansas City Chiefs have probably their biggest game of the season tomorrow on Thanksgiving in Dallas as they face off against Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. Today, we have our official injury report for both teams that have some substantial implications to the game, along with a bunch of different things to discuss ahead of this matchup, leading into a preview of this matchup as well. So lots to talk about here today on the Chiefs Report. Welcome in. I'm Jace Andrews, and you're listening or watching here on the Rogue Sports Network, and we're happy you chose to make us a part of your daily sports news listen. And like I said, today, an interesting one. We got our official injury reports for both the Dallas Cowboys and the Kansas City Chiefs. And with all that, we have some major implications to discuss. So let's go first with the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, those are the ones that we care a little bit more about, just to the degree of that's who's going to be on or off the field. So we'll start here. Kansas City, three guys, I should say, have been ruled out. Noah Gray, Trey Smith, and Christian Roland Wallace. Now, those three guys have been ruled out. However, there has been some guys who have been pulled up off the practice squad. We'll tell you those in just a minute. But I say that because it corresponds with a certain couple of players who have been ruled out for tomorrow's game. So I just want to preface that. But in terms of other guys on the injury report, the expectation is for pretty much everybody else to play. Jawan Taylor was on the injury report with a knee injury. However, he was a full participant in all 3 days. In terms of people who were not full participant in all 3 days, it's Xavier Worthy, who was limited in Monday's practice. That was attributed at least to Andy Reid as a little bit of a mishap in the walkthrough in some ways from last week. So just giving him a limited participant in that one. Rashee Rice with that hamstring injury, also a limited participant. But again, all of these guys, along with Neo Chanel, were limited on Monday's practice. However, were full participants on Tuesday and Wednesday. So in regards to the people who have not been ruled out, everybody is expected to play. Some interesting things that were on this injury report, though, that we haven't got to talk about yet. Patrick Mahomes was on this report. However, he is a full participant. Nothing really too much to worry about there. But the big thing, Isaiah Pacheco, Pop, looks like he's going to be back for this matchup against the Dallas Cowboys, which is a huge thing for a multitude of different reasons. However, the interesting part about all this, especially with Isaiah Pacheco, is what's the plan for the running back room? Because we know how good Kareem Hunt played in this last Sunday's matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. 30 carries, over 100 yards, and in some ways, it's a lot of things to assess in terms of what the expectation is moving forward. You also made a signing on a Sunday evening, getting Dameon Pierce and putting him on your practice squad. He was not one of the players elevated, by the way. Just want to put that out there as to say that it's not something that you have to worry about, at least in that aspect. But we do have some elevated players, and let's go to that now. So as we see here on X from the Kansas City Chiefs, we have the official roster update saying we have activated practice squad players, safety Mike Edwards and tackle Asa Pohl. These are standard elevations, and in case you do not know how the practice squad works, I'll kind of give you a quick rundown. On the practice squad, you can be elevated for a matchup 3 different times in the season. Mike Edwards, I believe this is his first time for Asa Pohl. So in regards to, as we relate this back to the injury report, you have a tackle and you have a safety. The safety, though, being Mike Edwards, is also just a great secondary player. And so the expectation from what my knowledge is, with Chris Roland Wallace out, Mike Edwards is going to somewhat take that place. We know that Shamari Connor, who is a safety, can technically play that cornerback slot. I'm curious because of the way that they view Mike Edwards, if they don't want to, I'm not going to say start him, but in certain packages, especially with Coach Spags, we know the way he likes to mix those up on defense. If maybe they move Shamari Connor to a cornerback position or cornerback slot and put Mike Edwards in the safety position, because you're obviously not going to bring up a practice squad safety and expect him to be a top-tier corner. Now, I think in a lot of ways, the Chiefs and their secondary pieces, they could all play safety. They could all play cornerback. Brian Cook is a fantastic safety. Shamari Connor is in the same position. And I really do think Trent McDuffie had asked upon, he could play a great safety. So ultimately, the secondary is where you're kind of talking about. In terms of tackles, that's more for the offensive line. Essapol has been known to be able to play guard and tackle, so that is a big thing for the Chiefs to note that. Trey Smith, being a guard, you're going to have somebody in a depth role. And for a lot of times when these practice squad elevations happen, when that is announced, a lot of the times it's a break if in case of emergency type situation. So what I'm basically saying is the only way, at least for Essapol, to get out there would be a absolute travesty of injuries happening in tomorrow afternoon's game. Do you see that happening? Absolutely not. I don't think that is something that will probably happen. Obviously, you got to knock on wood in that aspect, but that is not an expectation. Mike Edwards, just because he has history with the team, because it's a position that you need a lot of extra legs in, not to say that you don't in the offensive line, but they've already kind of prepared for that. I could expect to see Mike Edwards actually get some reps, get some snaps, as to probably not going to see much from a Poll. So that's the big reports for the Kansas City Chiefs. Do want to talk a little bit quickly about Isaiah Pacheco, just because he's been MIA for the past couple weeks with that MCL injury. Very good to have him back. 78 carries, 329 yards. He has not been the same player that he was in his first 2 seasons. Injuries hurt him last year, injury now again this year, and it just has not been, well, to not make a pun, it hasn't been the same pop from Pop. Now, to that being said, does that mean he should have the starting role when he comes back? Well, I personally don't think so, and I've talked about this on a previous show, but with Kareem Hunt and the game that he had this past Sunday against Indianapolis, 30 carries, 104 yards, averaging 3.5 per carry, I feel as though, especially with this game being the first for Isaiah Pacheco, the majority of the carries should go to Kareem Hunt in the first quarter, / maybe the second quarter, depending on how the game goes. But in all aspects, I'm giving him the opportunity over Pop because I've seen him get the 100 yards. I just saw it. They didn't have a rusher go over 50 plus yards or 60 yards since, but before this past Sunday's game. Not okay. So you need to kind of get that moving. Now, did Andy Reid lean heavily on the run in the Colts game? Yes, 30 carries is a lot for a 30-year-old running back. But in the same situation, against this Cowboys team, who, by the way, has fixed their run defense, that's the one thing Jerry Jones talked about. They have Quinn Williams, Osa Odighizuwa, and, of course, Kenny Clark from the Micah Parsons trade. That front 3 / front 2 with the Cowboys running a 4-3-4, you can expect to see a lot of packages. And I would not be surprised if the Cowboys load the box, put 5 defensive linemen in there, and had Quinnen, Kenny, and Osa on the line in certain packages. So that's why I think it's so key to find the running game, because if you can find the running game, the secondary for the Cowboys is not good at all. You can work that and work through it. And I'm getting probably a little bit too far into the preview section. So let's bring it back here and let's go and look at the Cowboys injury report ahead of tomorrow's game. Not really too much craziness on there. There is a lot of people on this injury report. However, in past weeks, the Cowboys have had even more than this on their injury report. But in terms of guys who are ruled out for tomorrow's game, the only guy who was, quote, officially ruled out was the tackle and a second-year tackle from Oklahoma, and Tyler Guyton, who was ruled out with an ankle injury. He did not participate in any practice this week and has officially been ruled out for the game. They do have one questionable status. That is for Kalen Carson, a cornerback. He has a hamstring injury. He was a limited participant in Tuesday and Wednesday's practice. For Carson, he was actually injured for a majority of the early part of the season. So I think in some aspects, I don't know if they're going to play him, as that questionable aspect is applied. Past that, a lot of these guys are just more or less coming off some injuries. Solomon Thomas is coming off an injury. He's been a full participant all week, but that's not necessarily saying he's going to play. The expectation is, but it's not necessarily saying that. Tyler Smith has been on the injury report as of late. However, he is expected to play. And the same thing can be said for Donovan Wilson, Deron Bland, Kevontae Turpin, and to some extent also Malik Hooker and Dante Fowler. Other guys on this report, Osa Digizawa, you heard me mention him in terms of the run defense for the Dallas Cowboys. He is a very big part of that defensive line. He did not participate on Monday's practice, was a limited participant in Tuesday's practice. However, today on Wednesday was a full participant. So if you were to ask me from the reports, from stuff we could look up and see on Twitter, X, and kind of the expectation from practices at the Dallas Cowboys, I think the only guy that's going to truly miss this game is Tyler Guyton. I think Carson maybe could, but in my mind, they're going to keep him on there just and use kind of a use in case of emergency type thing. Their cornerback room has also been terrible, so if he can play, may as well shove him out there. But nothing too crazy on this injury report. And do note that with Tyler Guyton on that tackle position, you can try and maybe get a couple extra cool blitz packages, as we have known as Spags to do. So the expectation for me, at least looking at this injury report, is to note the offensive line for the Dallas Cowboys is not 100% healthy. And while, yes, we never wish for injury, you can take advantage of it because it's a part of the game. I'm attacking that line. I'm blitzing Dak Prescott. He does a great job about getting in the pocket, but I wouldn't call him this elite running / scrambling quarterback. He's got good receivers. I love our secondary. I'm got to be honest. George Pickens is a fantastic wide receiver who, by the way, was limited participation in practice throughout this week. He is going to play tomorrow. That specification was not applied to him in terms of all. And the Cowboys, I believe it was a reporter, maybe officially tweeted that he will play in tomorrow's contest. So that is something to note. But I trust Trent McDuffie. I trust our secondary, Shamari Connor, and obviously you're missing Chris Wallace, but Noah's been great. So there's just a lot of guys in that secondary that I really do trust. And in my mind, I'm sending in that extra blitzer every time and forcing Dak Prescott to throw on the run, which is something you can do, but it definitely can add some added pressure.